Hey everyone, welcome back to the Python Beginner series. In the last video, we explored Lambda functions. They are a powerful way to write small anonymous functions in Python. If you haven't watched that yet, I highly recommend checking it out first because today's topic builds on that foundation. Today, we are diving into three super useful built-in functions in Python: the map function, the filter function, and the reduce function. These functions help us process collections like list or tuple or set, and they pair perfectly well with Lambda functions. So we'll go over today what these functions are, how do they compare against the loops, and we'll also see some real world examples where these functions can be used. So let's first talk about the map function. What is map? So map function basically applies a given function to every item of an iterable. So let's say we have a list of numbers. Let's just call it numbers, and maybe I can have some numbers here in this list. So this is the list with 7 items, 7 numbers in it. And I want to double each of the numbers. So what is the problem statement? I want to double each number in the list. So how can I do it? Maybe I can write a function for this, or maybe we already have a function for this. Let's just call it double. It takes a number as an input and it returns n multiplied by 2. Now, if you call this function, we need to call it for each item in this list because we want to double each number in the list. That means we can use for loop here for in numbers and call the double method, pass the number, and the return value we can append in an empty list. So let's just call that list output, and we can append this in an empty list. And once we are out of the for loop, let's go ahead and print the output. So yeah, this is giving us the expected output. We are getting the double numbers here. 1 multiplied by 2 is 2, double of 2 is 4, double of 3 is 6, and so on and so forth. But there is a much cleaner way to do it, and that's using map function. What is the syntax of map function? The syntax is map. It takes two inputs, the name of the function and the iterable. Iterable could be your list, it could be your tuple, it could be your set, anything you can iterate over. So what are we doing in the map function? We are saying that this given function has to be called for each item in the iterable. So let's write that down. So the map function applies a given function, whatever you have provided as an argument in the map function, to every item of this iterable. And what it returns, the map function, it returns a new iterable with transformed values. It returns new iterable with transformed values. So the map function will give us an iterable in the output. So if you have a list to begin with, it will give you a list in the output with transformed values, the output of the function that you have applied. So let's understand it with an example. So same thing here we want to do, but this time we'll use the map function instead. Instead of using the for loop, we'll use map. So we can say map. What is the function name? The function name is double. And we want to call this double for each item of this numbers list. So numbers is our iterable. Let's save the output in a variable. Let's just call it result. And if I go ahead and print result, it is a map data type. So we need to convert it to list so that we can read it. To convert it to list, we can use the list function. And this will convert this result to list here. So we are getting the same output as before, but this is much cleaner way of doing it. So instead of writing the for loop, the map function we can use. Map would internally loop over each item, call the double method for each of the items of our list here, but this is much cleaner. So we can create a regular function here, like we have done here. We have created a function with the name double, or else we can use the anonymous, the Lambda functions that we have learned about in the last video. So let's modify this here and use Lambda function instead. We'll say list map. And instead of giving the regular function here, let's just give the Lambda function. So Lambda x, the argument or the parameter could be anything, colon, we want to multiply x by 2, and then we'll pass the iterable. And it's giving us the same output. So this is much cleaner with this line right here. If somebody is reading through the code or your future self is reviewing the code that you have written previously, it's very easy for you to, know what's going on in this line without having to go back and check what the function double was all about and all of that. Let's try another example. Let's this time convert a list of temperatures from Celsius to Fahrenheit. So let's create a function. Let's call it Celsius to Fahrenheit, and it will return the converted temperature. So the formula is C multiplied by 9 divided by 5 plus 32. So here again, we'll say map, pass this function. And let's say this time, let's just create a tuple where we have all these temperatures in Celsius. I need to convert it to list. And this is what we are getting. Let's say we wanted our tuple back. We could have used tuple function here. So a couple of things that we should keep in mind while using the map function. So first of all, what kind of functions we can pass to the map function to get the meaningful output? Functions which are returning some transformed values, right? Like this is returning this value here for the value that you pass. So obviously those functions would qualify. Let's say this function instead is not returning anything. I don't have a return statement. I just have a print here. I'm just printing the output on the console instead of returning any value. When we don't have a return statement in a function definition, it returns none. So here in this case, when I run it now, this is just getting printed from this right here because this Celsius to Fahrenheit function gets called internally by this map function. But the output of map function is this, and it's just giving us none. So be mindful of that when you are using a function, ensure that it is returning some value. Otherwise, you just get none in the output. So that means a map function is used when there is a one-to-one mapping that's happening. So let's understand in which cases for which functions it would make sense to use map. So let's say we have these items, list of items, potato, corn, chicken. You want to apply a function. So potato gives you fries, corn gives you popcorn, chicken gives you chicken fry, right? So that means for each input, you get a corresponding output. So such functions you can apply with map. So the number of items remains same in the input and the output. We have applied some transformation, of course, by applying the function to each item of our list here, but the number of items remain same. So that's where you apply map. Now let's talk about filter next. So in case of filter, again, filter is similar to map in the sense that whatever function you have will get applied to each item of your iterable. But in the case of filter, as the name itself implies, we are filtering. So let's say the function is vegetarian. So just returning the items which are veg, like potato and corn here. So in the case of filter, it gives us a subset of items based on the some condition or criteria. That means this is vegetarian should return a Boolean value true or false. So wherever the Boolean value is true for whichever item, so let's say for this item, the Boolean value is true, this it is again true, and for this item, it is false. So in the output, then the filter function will give us only the items where the Boolean value returned was true by this is vegetarian function. So let's see filter also in action. So let's say we want to find even numbers from a list of numbers. Let's copy paste list from above. So these are the numbers that I have, and I would just want to have the even numbers. So let's create a function for checking if a number is even or not. So let's just call it even odd. It takes a number as an input. Then we'll do a modulus of n, divide the number n by 2 and look at the remainder. If remainder is equal to 0, that means it's a even number. We'll return the Boolean value true, else we will return the Boolean value false. Now, either we can call this even underscore odd in a loop. Let me show you that as well if we were to do it without using the filter function. So we would say for n in numbers, and we'll call even underscore odd function. So then we can check that if this is returning the value, the Boolean value true. So if we just do this, that means only when this is true, it will go inside the if loop. We want to append it to the another list. Let's just call it output. I'll create an empty list. And only if this is true, I want to append it. Append what? The n. And now if I print the output, as you can see, I have my even numbers. So this works. But again, you have to write the for loop here, check this condition, create an empty list. A much easier way to do it is using filter. So let's try. What is the syntax of filter? Filter, and then you give the function name, and then you give the iterable. Same as your map function. So let's try it out. We'll say filter. The function name here is even underscore odd, and the iterable is numbers. Let's run it. It's returning the filter object in the output. Let's convert it to list data type so that we can see what's in the output, and this is what we are getting with just one line. Much cleaner. Don't you agree? So once again, what is filter doing? So wherever the value returned for whichever item the value returned is true, it is just giving you those items in the output. So for which sort of functions you can use filter, which are returning these Boolean values to you where we are checking some condition and we want subset of the input. Generally, for a problem like this, you would not create a separate function even underscore odd, but rather use lambda function. So let's try to do the same thing this time, but instead of creating a regular function, let's use lambda function instead. So let's copy paste this here, and here we'll just replace it with a lambda function. Lambda, and the number will be an input. And then the condition. The condition here is that n modulus 2 is equal to 0. That's it. Because if you remember, for any condition that we check, it returns a Boolean value, true or false. This is returning a true. With 4, with 5, it will return a false. So even you don't have to apply if else here. Because this anyways will return true or false condition. And now let's run it. This is what we are getting in output. So this is more readable. Why? Because you don't have to now go back and check what this even underscore odd functions holds. All the information is right here. Let's try another one. So let's say we want to filter words longer than 4 characters. Filter words longer than 4 characters. So let's say we have some words, list of words. Apple, maybe we'll have Python, Java, C++, and maybe AI. Some random collection of words. And we'll apply filter. We'll use lambda function here. So lambda keyword. The word will be an input. So let's just say word, colon. And how do we check if the length of words is longer than 4 characters? Greater than 4. And the iterable is our LST1. We need to convert it to a list or a tuple so that we can see it. What are the items here? And this is what you're getting. So Apple and Python are greater than 4 characters. So filter and map both are returning iterable in the output. Next up, let's talk about reduce function. So reduce function is used to perform cumulative operation on a sequence. So again, for the reduce function, an iterable is our input. But the function that we apply reduces everything down to a single value. So it is not giving us iterable as an output. So here, let's say all these things, we process it, and there's a function which takes all these inputs and creates energy out of it. So you're getting a final one output. So it performs a cumulative operation on a sequence. And reduce is also different from map and filter because reduce is not a built-in function. It comes with another module called functool modules. So we have not discussed about modules yet. We will be covering it in the later videos in this course. So don't worry too much about it. Just remember that reduce you have to pick up from outside. It is not available internally in Python. So for doing that, you need to import it from functools module. So don't worry too much about this line right now. Just copy paste it when you're trying it in your code. This will become very clear when we talk about modules and packages in Python in later part of the course. And now we can go ahead and start using reduce. So let's see reduce in action then. The reduce syntax is reduce, the function name, and the iterable, just like your map and filter. Now, reduce does a cumulative operation. What do we mean by cumulative operation? So cumulative operation here means that reduce would take two elements at a time, apply the function, and it will carry forward the results to the next pair. Let's say we are given some numbers, list of numbers, and we want to calculate the sum of these numbers. So if we do it without using reduce, how we would do it? We will use the for loop. For num in numbers, and we'll create a variable, let's call it total, and we'll just keep adding to this total. Total is equal to total plus num. And once outside of this for loop, we can go ahead and print our total. So this is giving us 28, sum of all these numbers. How can we do this with reduce? I've already imported the reduce function using this line. After that, what I need to do, I can say reduce. I can write a lambda function here. So lambda. This lambda function will take two inputs. And it will do the sum of the two inputs. So what are these two inputs? The first input X is your item. So we are just going over each item one by one. And Y is the output of the previous function call. And then we have to pass the iterable. Iterable is our list here, the numbers. And let's run it. So it's also giving us 28. So first time around, it will take the first two numbers, 1 and 2, calculate the sum of the two numbers, which is 3. And then in the second time, y would hold the value 3 and x would hold the new value, which is 3. And again, the sum will happen. So now the sum is 6. Then once again, x will hold the new value, which is 4, and y will hold the output of the previous function call, which is 6. And this process repeats. So that is the reason we say it performs cumulative operation. It takes two elements at a time and applies the function and carry forward it to the next pair. So that's what's happening here as well. Cumulatively, we are applying this function to our list here. Let's try another one. Let's say we want to find the maximum number in a given list. So let's just take this list. I'll change some of the items of this list. And now we want to calculate the maximum of this. So let's use reduce for this. So reduce lambda, it will take two inputs, x comma y, because the output of the previous call would also be an input to this lambda function. X, return x. So we want it to return a bigger number, whichever is the bigger number of the two that we are comparing, return that. If x is greater than y, else y. So what are we doing here? We are basically updating the maximum number. So we compare 1 and 2, the maximum is 2 there between the two. Then, so the output of the first call is 2. Then we compare 2 and 30. 30 is a bigger number, so output is 30. Then we compare 4 and 30. Again, the output is 30. It returns 30. Then 30 and 50 is compared. 50 is bigger than 30, so the max number becomes 50, and we keep on repeating this process till we reach the end of the loop, and finally we will get the max number. And then finally, the iterable. And it's returning 50. So it's returning a single value, unlike your map and filter function, which were returning a iterable. Reduce you would use when you need to combine multiple elements into a single result. So this one works great with summation, multiplication, finding min and max like we are doing here, or any other cumulative operation. But reduce, I personally find that it makes code harder to read compared to using loops. So yeah, take a judgmental call there whether you want to use reduce or stick with the old-fashioned for loop for such problems. So yes, once again, when do we use map? When we want to apply a function to all elements in a list. Filter is used when we need to select specific elements based on a condition. And reduce when we need to combine elements into a single result. And that's it. You now know how to use map, filter, and reduce. It helps us write cleaner, more Pythonic code. These functions are really powerful when it comes to working with list and other such iterables. And they really make your code more readable and efficient as well. So start using it in your next project. Let me know in the comments if you have any questions. See you in the next one.